Chapter 151. Harry, I really appreciate it. Xiaoji had already left, and Snape closed the door to his office. Though his expression remained as perpetually gloomy as ever, his mind was in a state of utter turmoil. This was because Xiaoji had just explained to him the reasoning behind adding powdered snake fangs to the potion. It turned out that this process involved some sort of chemical reaction from Muggle chemistry. Xiaoji claimed that the powdered snake fangs weren't added for their inherent magical properties, but rather because they contained a substance called calcium carbonate. When Snape ground the snake fangs into powder and added them in, he had completely removed any trace of their magical essence beforehand. All those specialized terms and explanations from Xiaoji had utterly bewildered Snape. Could Muggle chemistry truly be integrated with the noble art of potion-making? At that moment, Snape began to question his own long-held beliefs. Was there perhaps some merit to those 027 Muggle concepts after all? Though Snape adored Harry and didn't care about his Muggle origins, he still held Muggles in general in low regard. Now, his worldview had been utterly shattered, with Xiaoji's theories echoing relentlessly in his mind. His own potion-making skills had reached a plateau he felt he could no longer improve. Yet Xiaoji's actions had just revealed an entirely new path forward. Nevertheless, his ingrained prejudice against Muggles led to a fierce internal struggle. Snape sat back down in his chair. On the desk lay the dream potion he had just finished brewing, with Xiaoji's assistance. The pale blue liquid was crystal clear and pure. Snape had never seen a dream potion with so few impurities. "Seems I've been completely forgotten, Severus." An aged voice suddenly interrupted Snape's thoughts. Snape stood up and retrieved a small mirror from the bookshelf. The mirror reflected none other than Professor Dumbledore's face. It turned out that when Xiaoji had visited earlier, Snape had taken quite some time to open the door because he'd been discussing certain matters with Dumbledore via the two-way mirror. Upon realizing Xiaoji had arrived, Snape had simply placed the mirror aside on the shelf. "So, you're intrigued by the methods Xiaoji just described?" Dumbledore chuckled softly. "I never imagined Muggle chemistry could have any application in potion-making," Snape replied, neither confirming nor denying it. "He claims he's entirely different from Voldemort. Do you truly believe that?" "Of course I do. You believe it too, don't you? Your actions and words tonight have been unlike anything we've seen before. Normally, you'd never hesitate to deduct points from Gryffindor just because someone explained the properties of snake fang powder." "Humph. Oh, Xiaoji truly spoke right to my heart just now," he said. "To any rational person, death is merely the beginning of another grand adventure." Those words seemed to have been plucked straight from my own thoughts. Dumbledore spoke gleefully.
T-Sage.
"He's starting to resemble you more and more in both speech and behavior. Truly, he's becoming increasingly detestable." Though Snape inwardly approved of Xiaoji, his tongue remained sharp as ever.
"Oh."
Severus. Unbeknownst to Xiaoji, Dumbledore had been eavesdropping from within Snape's office. Now, transformed back into a cat, he strolled freely through the midnight halls of Hogwarts. Initially, he'd considered exploring the Chamber of Secrets, but he ultimately decided against it. Staying up late was simply bad for one's health. After all, he was still growing. Lack of sleep could hinder his development. It would be dreadful if he failed to grow properly in the future. Thus, Xiaoji abandoned any thoughts of exploration and lazily returned to his dormitory to sleep. The following morning, Xiaoji awoke with great difficulty. After a quick wash, he took the wooden box containing the diary with him. He planned to eat breakfast first, then hand the diary over to Professor Dumbledore.
Ding.
"The system has detected that the host has secretly retained a Horcrux of Voldemort and is now attempting to extract the formula for the blood fusion potion."
Ding.
The host's nefarious actions fill the system with profound pride, deep shame. The host is far too wicked. How has he become so evil? Xiaoji had no idea why the system had suddenly gone haywire, but at least he now knew that Tom Riddle's potion formula was called the blood fusion potion.
Ding.
"The system hereby issues a mission. Extract Voldemort's potion formula. Upon success, The host shall receive an enhanced version of the blood fusion potion formula. Note: this version carries absolutely no side effects whatsoever. Xiaozhi calmly replied, "System, feel free to have these sorts of episodes more often. Lately, you've been utterly lazy and unproductive. This mission came at just the right time. Had it been delayed, I would have handed Tom over to Dumbledore already. At present, in order to obtain that side-effect-free blood fusion potion, he absolutely couldn't surrender Tom to anyone just yet. His emotions remained neutral. The system's reward was indeed enticing, yet he also felt the annoyance of suddenly being forced to do an assignment he'd thought was already off the table. Over the next few days, Xiaozhi lived quite leisurely. None of his classes posed any difficulty, and all his teachers adore him. He excelled academically, possessed immense talent, and was quite handsome. Such qualities made him beloved by teachers both in the Muggle world and the magical one. Even Snape no longer troubled him. Of course, Harry and Neville Longbottom remained Snape's primary targets for torment. Speaking of Harry, these past days had been utterly miserable for him. No matter how hard he tried to hide, he couldn't escape Colin Creevy's relentless pursuit. Even worse, he'd learned that Colin had formed a Harry Potter fan club. Colin served as president, while Ginny Weasley was vice president. And astonishingly, the club boasted an enormous membership count. After all, last school year, Harry had protected the Philosopher's Stone and defeated the Dark Wizard Professor Quirrell, acts that earned him immense admiration among young witches and wizards. Combined with his existing fame, the club attracted countless first years, even upperclassmen, the moment it was founded. Fred and George even clamored to design a logo, though Ginny firmly rejected them, unwilling to use a toilet ring design as the emblem. As a result, Harry endured days of sheer torment, living in constant fear and paranoia. Eventually, upon learning from Colin that this brilliant idea had originated from Xiaozhi, Harry's fiery intent to confront the instigator instantly faded away. "I had no choice. This was meant to train your reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance abilities. Once mastered, you'll never again have to worry about being covertly followed by Death Eaters or similar threats." Xiaozhi forcibly suppressed his grin and earnestly patted Harry on the shoulder. I truly appreciate this, really," Harry replied, voice filled with heartfelt gratitude. Long press any paragraph to record your thoughts. Chapter 152. Xiaozhi. Who is Xiaozhi? I barely know him. I'm just a useless cat. Time flew by, and the weekend arrived in the blink of an eye. For students, days without classes were always the most relaxing. Early that morning, Harry was called by Wood for training. Cassandra mentioned that she'd be participating in the Quidditch tryouts next week, so she wanted Xiaozhi to familiarize himself with the field in advance. Xiaozhi had no choice but to accompany Cassandra to watch Harry train. Holding a pie in his mouth, Xiaozhi sat on the stands, boredly gazing around. However, Harry and the others didn't seem to have come out yet. Cassandra figured they were still listening to Captain Wood give instructions and tactical explanations. Xiaozhi and Cassandra chose the highest section of the stands, a spot where they generally wouldn't be disturbed. Xiaozhi ate another piece of pie, then turned to look at Cassandra. Lately, Cassandra had been wearing a cold expression. She didn't exactly ignore Xiaozhi, but she certainly didn't treat him kindly either. "Cassandra, have you been angry lately?" "Not at all. Why would I be angry?" Cassandra replied flatly. "But you haven't smiled at all recently. Why don't you smile more? You look so lovely when you do." "Humph. Why should I smile for you? Hermione smiles so sweetly. Ask her to smile for you instead." Hermione wasn't around right now. She'd gone to help Professor McGonagall borrow a book and wouldn't return for a while. "All right, I won't look then."
But you can secretly smile a bit.
"Keeping such a stern face all the time is bad for your health." Cassandra gazed toward the distant goal hoops, as if flowers had suddenly sprouted there. She had no desire to talk to Xiaozhi at the moment. Suddenly, she felt something furry rubbing against her side. She turned her head and saw an adorably cute little black cat. "Humph." Cassandra turned away again. "Even if you've turned into an adorable little kitty, I still won't pay you any mind. Xiaji leaped onto the railing of the stands, staring at Cassandra with impossibly cute eyes, looking utterly pitiful. Cassandra, thoroughly charmed by his adorableness, finally couldn't resist any longer. She scooped the little black cat into her arms. Beaming with joy, she stroked his head, scratched under his chin, then flipped him over to rub his belly. Xiaji had transformed into a cat to make Cassandra happy. Yet her handling of him was downright brutal. I'm not a cat, so my spirit remains unyielding. All your actions have absolutely no effect on me. This sensation is turning unpleasant. Please stop. I feel like I'm starting to change. Originally convinced he could remain unfazed, Xiaji soon found himself completely succumbing to Cassandra's expert cat-petting techniques. How shameful. Yet it feels so good. Damn it. How can you be so skilled? All right, I surrender. I've given up resisting. As a cat, even if only temporarily, it's perfectly normal for me to accept human affection. So bring on the storm. Harry and the others finally emerged from the common room near noon. Wood's tactical explanations had taken quite some time. By then, Hermione, who'd been delayed, finally arrived. The moment she appeared, she saw an utterly adorable little black cat curled up on Cassandra's lap, purring contentedly. Oh, Xiaji. Hermione gazed helplessly at the black cat. Of course, she knew exactly who it was. Meow. What's Xiaji? You've got the wrong idea. I'm just a useless cat. Upon seeing Hermione, Cassandra hastily tossed the black cat onto a nearby chair, her face flushing red. When no one was around, she could freely dote on this little cat, but with Hermione present, she lacked the nerve to do so. Hermione, however, had no such inhibitions. Grinning broadly, she scooped up the black cat and proceeded to lavishly pet him. Cassandra kept stealing glances over, utterly distracted from any thoughts of Quidditch training. Nice, very nice. Hermione's technique is excellent too. The little black cat purred blissfully. Just as Xiaji was fully indulging in his useless cat existence, a conflict erupted on the Quidditch field. Noticing what was happening, Hermione carefully set Xiaji down and hurried down from the stands. Cassandra also frowned and descended. Xiaji reluctantly reverted to human form. Damn it! Who keeps interrupting my wonderful time with a beautiful girl? He leaned over the railing to peer down, spotting Slytherin players surrounding Draco Malfoy in their midst. It's you again. Xiaji walked down the steps expressionlessly. On the field, Wood shouted furiously, "This field is reserved exclusively for us today. You're not allowed to train here." Yet Marcus Flint, Slytherin's captain, produced a note from Professor Snape granting Slytherin permission to bring their new seeker, Draco Malfoy, to train that very day. Wood was livid. Today was supposed to be Gryffindor's exclusive training day, and Slytherin's action struck him as utterly reprehensible. To draw an analogy, Slytherin acted like a bunch of old folks stubbornly claiming a field solely for their own square dancing, while Wood and his team were like young basketball players being unceremoniously shooed away. Your new seeker is Draco Malfoy? Lucius Malfoy's son. Fred spoke with distaste. How fascinating. You actually mentioned his father's name. Then allow me to show you the generous gift his father bestowed upon us. The Slytherin players raised their brand new brooms, 7 gleaming Nimbus, 2,000 ones in total. The sight dazzled every Gryffindor player. Those brooms were the latest model released just last month. Behold. Flint proudly displayed his own new broom. Faced with an entire lineup of Nimbus 2001s, Gryffindor players stood speechless. It was like facing an entire fleet of supercars while riding nothing but humble Wuling Hongwangs. How could they possibly compete? Malfoy smirked smugly. Perhaps Gryffindor can scrape together some gold to buy new brooms too. They could auction off those 5-star rated models. I'm sure museums would pay a fortune for them. Slytherin players erupted into laughter. At least no one in Gryffindor needs to pay to join. We earn our spots purely through skill. Hermione retorted indignantly. Stung by this jab, Draco Malfoy snapped back furiously. Nobody asked for your opinion, you filthy little muggle. Thud. Before anyone could react, Hermione had charged forward, delivering a thunderous punch straight to Malfoy's nose. She remembered Siagi's advice. Should anyone ever hurl that insult at her, she shouldn't hesitate. Just throw a punch. Chapter 153. Siagi. I gave you a chance, but you blew it.
Ah.
Draco Malfoy screamed in agony, clutching his nose as he collapsed to the ground. Though Hermione wasn't particularly strong, her punch had struck Malfoy right on his nasal bridge, a highly vulnerable spot. Blood began gushing from his nose, causing him to wail in sheer panic. How dare you hit me? I'll tell my father. Malfoy was practically frothing with rage. The Slytherin students nearby, seeing their chief patron attacked, naturally refused to stay silent. One by one, they drew their wands. On the Gryffindor side, the moment Malfoy uttered the word mudblood, everyone erupted in fury. They were even more enraged than the Slytherins. Gryffindor students likewise raised their wands, determined to teach this audacious girl a lesson. A massive battle seemed inevitable at this point. Malfoy struggled to his feet, raised his wand, and prepared to hurl a curse at Hermione. Wormtail. Protego horribilis. Siagi. Voice rang out from behind the Gryffindor group. Thud. The Slytherin students preparing to attack, along with Malfoy mid-spellcasting, were all sent flying by Siagi's powerful shield charm. In essence, the Slytherins hadn't even had time to react before they were sprawled on the ground. The battle ended before it even began. Siagi walked expressionlessly toward the Gryffindors. Everyone instinctively stepped aside to clear him a path. He'd just single-handedly taken down an entire group of opponents. Nearly everyone stood awestruck by Siagi's sheer power. Only now did they truly believe that the reports of him defeating an entire squad of Aurors might indeed be true. Well done, Hermione. Next time someone insults you like that, feel free to blast them with a curse, Siagi said, stepping in front of Hermione. Hermione gazed at Siagi's back and flashed a sweet smile. You dared attack us? Don't come any closer. Malfoy stared at Siagi in horror. Earlier, he hadn't noticed Siagi's presence and, driven by rage, had recklessly uttered that word. Had he seen Siagi first, he would never have dared speak it. Watching Siagi advance step by step, Malfoy nearly wet himself in fear. His father had uttered that same word at a bookstore, only to be kicked by Siagi straight into St. Mungo's hospital for a night. Now Malfoy had said it again right in front of him. His terror was beyond measure. This is school grounds. You can't just act recklessly.
Exactly.
You ought to be grateful this is a school, Siagi replied calmly, yet to Malfoy, those words sounded like whispers from a demon. Inverted mirror. Instantly, Malfoy found himself hanging upside down in midair. You said that word just now, didn't you? What did I tell you last time? And no, you can't turn me into maggots. So you do remember, Siagi replied coldly. I truly fail to see what you have to be proud of. Your grades lag behind ours, your abilities pale in comparison, your strength is non-existent, and your courage is even less. You become smug the moment you gain any advantage, yet beg for mercy at the first sign of defeat. A spineless coward who preys only on the weak. What right do you have to look down on us? Is it merely because of that filthy blood running through you, the kind that makes you utterly stupid? To be honest, in my eyes, you fools who prattle on about pure-blood honor aren't even worth a single pig. Why you can't insult my bloodline? Malfoy stammered in fear. Oh, now you're angry? Siagi released the inverted mirror spell. Malfoy dropped to the ground with a thud. Fine. Since you cling so dearly to that so-called bloodline honor, stand up and duel me. Siagi tossed Malfoy's wand back at him. Yet Malfoy trembled uncontrollably, too afraid to pick it up. What's the matter? Pick up your wand and defend your precious, pure-blood honor. What are you waiting for? If your noble bloodline is truly so glorious, why didn't you courageously attack me when I insulted your bloodline as being worse than pigs? Now pick up your wand and stand up. Malfoy shivered violently, then slowly rose to his feet. His hand clutching the wand shook like a Parkinson's patient's. Come now. Your beloved father must have taught you proper duel etiquette. We must bow to each other first, Xiaoji casually flicked his wand toward Malfoy. It tilted downward slightly, and suddenly Malfoy felt an immense force compelling him to bend into a bow. Even Voldemort would have commended Xiaoji's technique here.
All right.
Now attack me. Defeat me and defend your so-called noble bloodline. Malfoy gazed at the towering, intimidating figure of Xiaoji before him and promptly collapsed back to the ground, wand slipping from his grasp. I gave you a chance, yet you failed utterly, Xiaoji sighed. Seems your pureblood honor is nothing but a joke. There was a stark contrast here. Harry, though battered during forced duels against Voldemort, still fought back bravely. Malfoy utterly disappointed him. Even if Malfoy had cast even a single spell at him, even if it had been ineffective, Xiaoji would have let him off. Yet this wretched coward. Xiaoji strode over, grabbed Malfoy by his collar, and hoisted him up like a chick. What are you doing? This is school grounds, you can't. You're coming with me to see Professor Snape, Xiaoji declared coldly. Let's see how he feels about you hurling such vile insults at a classmate. If he fails to deliver justice, then we'll bring you before Professor Dumbledore. Upon hearing he'd be taken to Snape, Malfoy's heart leapt. Snape and his father were close friends. Surely Snape would save him and punish Xiaoji severely. Witnessing Xiaoji's furious outburst, the Slytherin students dared not utter a word, fearing they'd become targets themselves. Gryffindors, meanwhile, felt immense satisfaction. Xiaoji's scathing rebukes toward Malfoy brought them profound relief. Harry, in particular, felt pure elation. Malfoy constantly picked fights with him, so seeing him humbled was sweeter than eating 3 ice creams on a scorching summer day. Yet when they realized Xiaoji intended to drag Malfoy straight to Snape, the Gryffindors paled in shock. Everyone knew Snape's temperament well, and Malfoy was his favorite student. In fact, Snape had praised only one student during class, Malfoy. Hermione gently tugged at Xiaoji's arm. Perhaps we should see Professor McGonagall instead of Snape. Harry agreed wholeheartedly. He knew all too well what Snape was capable of. Xiaoji leading Malfoy to him was like sending a lamb to a tiger. Today, I'm taking him straight to Snape for judgment. Not even Professor Dumbledore could stop me. That's a promise. Xiaoji strode off, Malfoy dangling limply in his grip. Cassandra suddenly spoke up. Never mind. We can't stop him. Better send someone to inform Professor McGonagall at once. Chapter 154. Harry, good heavens. Snape had gone completely mad. In the end, they decided to have Ron go find Professor McGonagall, while the rest chose to follow Xiaoji. The Slytherin students exchanged glances, and then followed suit as well. They were eager to see Xiaoji get punished by their own head of house. After all, Xiaoji had been quite the showstopper today. With one hand, he was effortlessly dragging Draco Malfoy along as they strode toward Snape's office. Behind him, a whole crowd struggled to keep up, practically sprinting to match his pace. Upon seeing this, students along the way joined in, forming a massive onlooker mob. It just so happened to be the weekend. Everyone was free and had no classes to attend. Thus, more and more students flocked to follow Xiaoji. Before long, an enormous throng was trailing behind him. To anyone unaware, it would have seemed like a gang was about to pick a fight. Xiaoji marched up to Snape's office door. Without setting Draco down, he began hammering on the door with all his might. This act left Harry, Neville, and the others utterly stunned. Even they, who usually feared Snape, wouldn't dare dream of smashing his door like that. Who is it? Snape's voice came from within, laced with evident fury. Me, Xiaoji replied insolently. Snape had been deep into studying Muggle chemistry, but the endless formulas left him dizzy and thoroughly irritated. Now, someone was actually banging on his door, and with such force. That was enough to send him into a rage. Yet upon hearing it was Xiaoji, his anger momentarily paused. He felt puzzled too. Normally, this kid only snuck over in the dead of night whenever he had business. Why was he here in broad daylight? Snape didn't dwell on it long. Waving his wand, he swiftly gathered all the Muggle books on his desk. He certainly didn't want Xiaoji to see him studying those books he so despised. As usual, Snape opened the door just a crack. He assumed only Xiaji stood outside, but the moment he peeked through, his heart skipped a beat. Behind Xiaji was an enormous crowd. For a split second, Snape wondered if he docked Gryffindor so many points that they'd banded together to rebel. Then he heard Xiaji speak. "Headmaster, are you going to handle matters concerning Slytherin?" "I am Slytherin's head of house. Of course I'll handle it," Snape replied stiffly. Only then did he notice Draco, whose face was swollen and bruised. "Xiaji, what did you do to Malfoy? Did you hit him?" Snape's gaze instantly turned dangerous. "Exactly, Professor. Xiaji hit me. He used magic against us. The entire Slytherin team was attacked." Draco suddenly started struggling in Xiaji's grip. Xiaji tossed him aside in disgust. So now that he'd found a powerful protector, Malfoy had the audacity to stand tall again. Draco scrambled to his feet and promptly hid behind Snape. "And that Hermione Granger, she's the one who broke my nose," he crowed proudly from behind Snape's back. Hermione pressed her lips together, glaring at Malfoy with utter disdain. Had Snape not stood right there, she'd have undoubtedly rushed forward to punch him again. "Granger, why did you strike Malfoy? And Xiaji, why did you attack Slytherin players?" Snape fixed them both with his signature deadfish stare. "Because he insulted me with vile words," Hermione bravely replied. "Humph. Just because of some meaningless words, you resort to violence." Xiaji suddenly interjected. "Professor Snape, do you truly believe that words degrading someone's character are meaningless?" Snape's pupils contracted slightly. Xiaji's words had stirred up a deeply buried memory. Was it truly a trivial matter? Back then, he'd uttered one angry insult, and it had haunted him for life. Even now, he still recalled Lily's expression when he'd spat out that word. Mudblood. Snape turned toward the smug Draco. "What exactly did you call her?" "And nothing special." Frightened by Snape's expression, Draco still couldn't see anything wrong with his own words. I said she was a filthy little mudblood." Boom! Upon hearing that word, Snape felt as though a thunderclap had exploded inside his skull. It had been years since he'd heard it in reality. It only ever haunted his nightmares. In those nightmares, upon uttering mudblood, Lily abandoned him and ran straight into the arms of that arrogant, foolish James Potter. But it's true. She is one. "Silence, Malfoy." Snape's glare was ferocious. Draco nearly collapsed on the spot. "How dare you? How dare you utter that word?" "Detention. You'll serve a month of detention starting next week. And Slytherin loses 20 points. Snape's face twisted with rage as he stormed back into his office, slamming the door shut with a thunderous bang. Draco stood frozen. What on earth was happening? Wasn't he Snape's favorite student? Hadn't Snape and his father Lucius Malfoy been close friends for ages? So why had he been beaten, punished with detention, and lost points? Meanwhile, Xiaji and the others, the actual aggressors, hadn't lost a single point. Clap, clap, clap. She applauded. "All right, everyone, you may disperse now." Harry and the others were utterly bewildered. Had Snape truly lost his mind today? He docked his own house points, and Draco had been sentenced to a full month of detention. Good heavens, had the sun actually risen in the west? Not just Harry and Neville. Even the other students who'd gathered to watch were stunned. Was this still the Snape they knew? The one who fiercely protected his own students and showed extreme bias toward Slytherin? Why had he punished Draco instead of Xiaji and Hermione, who'd initiated the violence? Was it truly just because of that offensive word? Indeed, it was precisely because of that word. Xiaji had deliberately provoked those painful memories within Snape, memories that had scarred him for life. Had he not uttered that word, perhaps Lily would have stayed by his side, and she might not have met her end at Voldemort's hands. Thus, the moment Draco uttered it in Snape's presence, Xiaji knew Malfoy was doomed. Harry couldn't help but ask, "Why?" "I mean, Professor Snape," Xiaji patted Harry's shoulder. "Ahem. The truth is, Professor Snape's also a pitiable man. Try not to burden him with so much blame in the future." Harry stared blankly. What on earth was he talking about? There they are. Just then, Professor McGonagall and Ron hurried over from afar, both radiating fury. Chapter 155. Professor McGonagall. Slytherin loses 20 points. Xiaji? I have no idea. Professor McGonagall stormed over, clearly furious. I've heard what happened. How dare you attack a fellow student? McGonagall pursed her lips, her eyes blazing with anger as she gazed at Xiaji. Disappointed, she spoke up. Xiaji, I thought you'd never pull such a stunt, hurting a classmate like this. She'd come here upon receiving a message from Ron, who, deeply impressed by Xiaji's ability to send an entire group of Slytherins sprawling with a single spell, had naturally emphasized that feat when reporting to McGonagall. Admittedly, Ron had done Xiaji a disservice with this move, but Xiaji actually prevented the conflict from escalating further. Thanks to his spell, both sides refrained from fighting. Moreover, he personally brought Draco Malfoy here to Professor Snape so the issue could be properly addressed. He didn't handle it on his own. I believe Xiaji acted perfectly responsibly. Professor, you mustn't punish him. Cassandra Vole interjected before Xiaji could speak. Even so, McGonagall wavered slightly. If Xiaji's actions were truly aimed at stopping a brawl, Professor McGonagall, this entire incident was my fault. I struck Malfoy, Hermione declared. He called me a filthy Muggleborn, and though I come from a Muggle family, I fully understand how offensive that term is. I simply couldn't hold back. Xiaji intervened solely to stop them from attacking me, so you should punish me instead. Professor, I believe you mustn't penalize someone who bravely defends his peers and steps up to protect them. Luna's ethereal voice rang out from the crowd. One by one, Gryffindor students began pleading on Xiaji's behalf. Upon hearing this, McGonagall finally grasped what had transpired. She cast an annoyed glance at Ron, then turned a stern eye on Malfoy. How dare you utter such vulgar insults toward a classmate? You nearly provoked a brawl between both houses' Quidditch teams. Reprehensible. Utterly disgraceful. Slytherin loses 20 points. Malfoy, you'll serve a month of detention. Malfoy stood frozen. Just moments ago, his own head of house had docked him 20 points and sentenced him to a month's detention. Now, he faced another 20-point deduction and an additional month of confinement? Professor, Malfoy's already been disciplined by Professor Snape, who deducted 20 points from Slytherin and imposed a month's detention on him. Flint hurriedly interjected.
Oh.
Well, at least he proved fair-minded for once. McGonagall cast an odd glance towards Snape's office door. Does that mean? No further point deductions, but his detention period extends by another month. Make sure you learn from this, Mr. Malfoy. With that, McGonagall turned abruptly and strode off, practically ignoring Xiaji and the others. As soon as her silhouette vanished down the corridor, Gryffindor students erupted in cheers. Yet Xiaji swiftly urged them to flee. Trusting him implicitly, they hurried after him without questioning why. Sure enough, moments later, Snape's office door slammed open with a thunderous crash. Xiaji knew full well that Snape allowing them to escape was already miraculous. Cheering right outside Snape's sanctum? One simply couldn't afford such arrogance. Unable to catch them to levy penalties, Snape sulkily shut the door once more, deigning not even a glance at Malfoy. Slumped on the floor, Malfoy wore a mournful expression. He couldn't comprehend why fate had turned so cruel. First his head of house punished him, then McGonagall followed suit, and now this? Even Snape seemed to have abandoned him. In the end, Slytherin teammates escorted him to the hospital wing. After all, he remained their biggest patron, funding their newest broom models. For Gryffindor, this day would forever be etched in memory. Snape had finally penalized his own house. Though no one knew exactly how Xiaji managed it, they cared little. All they needed to know was that Xiaji was truly extraordinary. That evening, the Gryffindor common room brimmed with excitement. Fred and George somehow procured a massive barrel of butterbeer, while Xiaji fetched countless delectable treats from the kitchens. As he departed, the house elves gazed at him with profound reverence and gratitude. Oh, He's such a wonderful gentleman. Not only thanked us, but even taught us how to cook. And he remembered each of our names perfectly, one elf exclaimed, eyes sparkling. After leaving ample food behind, Xiaoji joined Cassandra and the others in heading to the room of requirement. This time, Luna accompanied them as well. Xiaoji spread the feast across the table. Though there was truly nothing to celebrate, he merely wanted an excuse for a lavish meal. Perhaps it was the effect of those 10 points boosting his physical strength, but his appetite remained insatiable. Food always invigorated him immensely. Hermione, that punch of yours was flawless. Xiaoji mumbled around a roasted chicken leg. So swift I barely saw it. Truthfully, had you not acted, I'd have dealt him a far harsher blow. Oh, thank you, Xiaoji, Hermione exhaled shakily. Otherwise, I might have been expelled. She recalled how, post-punch, Slytherin students would have retaliated. Without Xiaoji's timely intervention, a full-scale brawl would have erupted, and expulsion would have been highly likely. Relax, Hermione. Expelling you over Malfoy? Professor Dumbledore would never allow it, and Hogwarts certainly wouldn't lose such a brilliant student. Xiaoji smiled warmly. Dumbledore was a noble soul, unlike Lucius Malfoy. Ahem. Cassandra cleared her throat, eyeing Xiaoji. Actually, not all pureblood families uphold notions of pureblood honor. Cassandra, I harbor no prejudice against purebloods. I merely find this purity supremacy ideology utterly foolish. Xiaoji chuckled. All wizards deserve equality. Social standing may vary based on merit, but no one should claim superiority over others. Luna sat silently on the couch, feeding blades of grass to her crumple-horned snorkack. Occasionally, she glanced at Xiaoji. Cassandra exhaled softly. I merely point out a fact. My family rejects such nonsense. It was the Dark Lord himself who propagated this rhetoric to entice allied houses. For me, true pride stems solely from personal strength. Cassandra had always valued competence above all. Had Xiaoji not surpassed her in every aspect, they'd never have become friends. I understand, Cassandra. Your parents never opposed our friendship, right? Satiated, Xiaoji reverted to his feline form. This guise let him unwind most effortlessly. Of course, this wasn't because assuming a cat form let him bask in tender embraces from lovely maidens. Absolutely not. Chapter 156. Xiaoji, Mr. G, you wouldn't want Albus angry with you, would you? Mr. X, who wishes to remain anonymous. Hello. I've always believed that Muggles indeed shouldn't be underestimated. Magic and technology can certainly complement each other in many ways. Yet, one must admit that Muggles stand no chance against wizards. A simple Imperio spell is enough to make their leaders bow down to us. Why then would we bother cultivating relationships or seeking cooperation with them? We could simply treat Muggles just like draft animals, forcing them to labor for us. In such a manner, the glorious future of a fusion between magic and technology could still be achieved, and even more swiftly at that. You might feel some reluctance, but when striving for great achievements, unnecessary emotions must be cast aside. Mr. G, who wishes to remain anonymous. Xiaoji set down the letter, thinking to himself, truly worthy of being called Mr. G. This man openly regarded Muggles as mere livestock. 0-27. Part of his reasoning was sound. By controlling Muggle leaders, one could essentially control all Muggles, thereby achieving full domination over them. Yet, while this method was undeniably the simplest and quickest, it carried massive drawbacks. Xiaoji took out a fresh parchment and swiftly began writing with a quill. Asterisk Mr. G, who wishes to remain anonymous.
Hello.
On the surface, your proposed method appears the easiest to implement. However, in reality, it stands no chance of success. It possesses fatal flaws. First, Muggle governance isn't as stable as we might assume. Temporarily, we might treat their leaders as tools and Muggles as beasts of burden. Yet, over time, resistance will inevitably arise, uprisings against the existing regime. You may dismiss their resistance as insignificant, but never forget, Muggles possess a numerical advantage we could never match. With such a massive population, there's bound to be Muggle-born wizards among them. If you yourself were a wizard born to Muggle parents, would you stand by silently while your own family was oppressed and exploited? They'd rise up against us, and with even a small group of such rebels, our control over Muggle leadership would crumble. Though such resistance may initially seem weak, it's never to be underestimated. A single spark can ignite a wildfire. As long as resistance exists, our cause cannot truly be deemed successful. Second, can you guarantee that all wizards will side with us once this plan is enacted? At the very least, if my parents were Muggles or if my friends were Muggles, I'd never join your cause. Our laws permit marriage between wizards and Muggles, and no husband or wife wishes to see their partner reduced to an enemy. Once our plan unfolds, these individuals will become our adversaries, and their numbers will far exceed our expectations. Forcing such a plan through would inevitably spark a massive wizarding war. Moreover, I'm certain that the greatest white wizard of this century, Albus Dumbledore, would vehemently oppose this enslavement of Muggles. He'd become our fiercest foe, and we'd stand no chance of defeating him or winning such a war. Your plan introduces far too many unpredictable variables. Therefore, resolving this issue through peaceful means, though slower and equally difficult, remains the optimal path. By coexisting harmoniously with Muggles and collaborating with them, even Dumbledore would find himself siding with us. If we can become friends, why must we be enemies? This is my stance on the matter. Mr. X, who wishes to remain anonymous. Within a dimly lit stone chamber, a hunched figure appeared, frail and emaciated. He set down the parchment and murmured softly, Albus, Albus, stand with me. Become friends once more. His eyes suddenly gleamed brightly in the gloom. That Tuesday afternoon marked the day Gryffindor's Quidditch team would select new members. Xiaji and Cassandra Vole had both submitted applications, so today they headed to the Quidditch pitch for the trials. After changing into their robes, both held a Firebolt 2001 in hand as they walked from the changing room to the field. The broomstick in Xiaji's hands had been given to him by Cassandra. She'd clearly planned this in advance, preparing 2 brooms, though she claimed she'd bought the second merely as a backup, not specifically for him. Xiaji chose not to expose this somewhat clumsy lie. He gratefully accepted her gift. Though he had a strong jaw, he certainly wouldn't mind having his food softened up a bit now and then. Never underestimate young wizards' passion for Quidditch. By the time Xiaji and Cassandra arrived, dozens of Gryffindor students had already gathered for the trials, second years and older alike. Colin and Ginny sat dejectedly in the stands, wishing they could join Harry on the team. First years weren't permitted to participate. After all, Harry Potter was the sole exception in Hogwarts history, joining the team at age 11. Alongside Colin and Ginny sat numerous other members of the Harry Potter fan club. Harry himself assisted Wood in selecting players, though he wore a rather gloomy expression. Every time he glanced at those fans in the stands, he felt immense distress. He had to devise a way to slip away before trials ended, lest he be swarmed for photos and autographs. Worst of all, he dreaded encountering Lockhart during such moments. Imagining that man flashing his revolting grin, patting his shoulder and sighing, Harry, I'm to blame for letting you taste fame's sweet nectar," sent shivers down Harry's spine. He had to find a way to vanish quietly. Now more than ever, he yearned to master the disillusionment charm. If he could achieve invisibility, even encountering the night bus wouldn't seem so dreadful. As Harry pondered this, he spotted Xiaji. "Xiaji, you and Cassandra want to join the team?" Harry asked in surprise. "I thought you weren't particularly interested in Quidditch?" "True, I'm not fanatically obsessed with it, but I adore flying. On campus, Quidditch is the only time we get to fly freely," Xiaji replied honestly. Wood, too, had noticed Xiaji. This younger student had made a deep impression on him. After all, he'd once downed an entire group of Slytherins with a single spell. Chapter 157. Xiaji. Cassandra Vole, will you fly with me one more time? Xiaji. I'm so glad you've joined us for the Quidditch tryouts. Wood enthusiastically stepped forward. On the day of the event, Xiaji effortlessly lifted Draco Malfoy off the ground, a display of sheer, almost legendary strength. As long as one's flying wasn't abysmal and their throwing accuracy was decent, they stood a good chance of becoming an excellent chaser. That was Wood's first thought upon seeing Xiaji prepare to join the tryouts. At the very least, as a keeper, he knew exactly what kind of players he wanted on his team. Of course, if Xiaji also possessed excellent flying skills, he could easily serve as a beater too. Wood believed that someone with such immense strength would be able to blast bludgers with incredible force. Therefore, provided Xiaji wasn't a terrible flyer like Neville Longbottom, Wood would definitely welcome him onto the team. As for Cassandra Vole, Wood still needed to observe her further to determine whether she'd be a suitable addition. Once everyone had gathered, Wood announced the start of the tryouts. First up was the simplest test, flying around the pitch in a group, completing 3 laps total. This was meant to evaluate each player's basic flying abilities. Anyone unable to even fly properly should probably head back home right away. What other skills needed testing? At the sound of Wood's whistle, everyone shot into the air like arrows released from bows. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. All the participants began circling the pitch. Xiaji and Cassandra Vole took the lead, swiftly pulling ahead of everyone else. After all, they were riding the brand new model, the Nimbus 2001. This broomstick was even faster than Harry's Nimbus 2000. Whoa! Xiaji exclaimed excitedly. This broom was blisteringly fast. Though it still couldn't match his own natural flying speed, it was still incredibly thrilling. It had been ages since he'd gotten to fly so freely. Cassandra's flying skills were equally superb. She'd learned to ride a broom at a very young age under her mother's guidance. Swish, swish. Xiaji and Cassandra continued leading the pack, gradually pulling further and further ahead of the others. Woo! On the ground, Harry and Hermione watched in awe as Xiaji and Cassandra sped up even more. They're amazing, Wood cried out ecstatically. Look at that. They barely slowed down at all during those turns. Good heavens, their flying skills are on par with yours, Harry. He was overjoyed. This meant his team stood to gain 2 incredibly powerful players. This year's Quidditch Cup was practically his for the taking. Last year, thanks to Harry's absence from the final match being due only to minor injuries, Gryffindor had utterly dominated Ravenclaw and claimed the championship. That success had given Wood immense confidence. This year, he was determined to retain the title. After completing just over 1 lap, Xiaji and Cassandra had already caught up to the tail end of the main group. Cassandra, how about we overtake them all? Xiaji called out. Swish, swish, swish. Like 2 graceful butterflies, they weaved through the crowd of players, effortlessly passing one after another. Oh, their technique. Wood watched in sheer bliss as Xiaji and Cassandra flawlessly navigated through the pack using their superior flying prowess. I think they've already passed the second test, Harry murmured softly. The second test involved obstacle avoidance, maintaining speed while dodging barriers in their path. Yet Xiaji and Cassandra had already accomplished this. They'd pulled far ahead of the others and continued effortlessly overtaking those in front of them. Look at them. They're flying so fast. Whoa. That dodge was incredibly risky. Is that Xiaji? He looks so cool. I wonder if Xiaji has a girlfriend? Is Vole his girlfriend? I doubt it. Oh, Miss Vole is absolutely gorgeous. The onlookers watched in rapture as the 2 showcased their skills. Soon, the 3 laps concluded. Incredibly, Xiaji and Cassandra had finished 2.5 laps ahead of everyone else. All the players landed, though aside from those 2, nearly everyone wore dejected expressions. Clearly, being consistently outpaced had dealt them a heavy blow to their confidence. Almost everyone realized that Xiaji and Cassandra had essentially secured their spots on the team. Yet Wood didn't overlook the others. Aside from Xiaji and Cassandra, he selected 10 additional players to undergo the second test. Xiaji, Miss Vole, you 2 don't need to participate in round 2, Wood declared excitedly. Your performance just now speaks volumes. No one can possibly object. Xiaji shook his head. I adore flying. Please let me join round 2. Cassandra, can you fly alongside me one more time? Well, if you insist. Cassandra still wore a rosy glow from her exhilarating flight earlier. Her lips curved into a gentle smile as she accepted Xiaoji's invitation. Hermione stood among the crowd, brimming with envy. Sadly, she possessed no natural talent for flying, a skill utterly impossible to master through books alone. During the subsequent obstacle course test, several others performed admirably. Yet compared to Xiaoji and Cassandra's jaw-dropping displays, everyone else seemed utterly ordinary. Still, Wood retained several candidates. Responsible as ever, Wood refused to discard other potential gems just because Xiaoji and Cassandra had dazzled him. Xiaoji, Cassandra, your coordination is flawless. You'd both excel as chasers or beaters. Wood exclaimed fervently. Let's test that right now. Xiaoji and Cassandra ascended into the sky to undergo the beater trials. 2 bludgers whizzed toward them, one aimed at each player. Xiaoji raised his bat and effortlessly struck his bludger straight toward Fred. The projectile streaked past Fred's forehead, sending him drenched in cold sweat. Xiaoji glanced at his hand, then shook his head. He probably wouldn't suit beater duties. He might accidentally kill someone with his sheer strength. Cassandra's experience was far less smooth. Raw power had never been her forte. After barely managing to deflect her bludger, her bat nearly slipped from her grasp. Wood instantly recognized the issue. Cassandra lacked sufficient strength for beater work. And Xiaoji? He was far too strong. A bludger struck by him might prove fatal. Thus, Wood promptly arranged a chaser trial for them both. Fred and George would handle beater duties instead. Wood himself assumed the keeper position. The test was straightforward. Cassandra and Xiaoji each threw 10 quaffles. Cassandra went first. Though lacking sheer power, her flying skill was impeccable, and her aim was spot on. Her clever feints thoroughly confused Wood. In the end, 6 of her 10 throws found the hoops. Wood was ecstatic. This was a pure skill-based player. If Xiaoji matched this level, Gryffindor would gain 2 unparalleled scorers. Cassandra landed. Xiaoji high-fived her before taking off with a quaffle. Wood stationed himself before the goalposts, visibly tense. Xiaoji cradled the ball, leaning forward slightly. Whoosh! In an instant, he transformed into a blur streaking straight toward the hoops. Chapter 158. 10 throws, 10 hits. Pitching that stunned everyone. Wood stared intently at the figure hurtling toward him like a meteor. He was well aware of Xiaoji's abilities. One moment of carelessness could easily result in the quaffle being hurled straight into the goal hoops. Whoosh! Just as Xiaoji reached a point 20 meters to Wood's left, he released the quaffle from his hand. Wood's pupils contracted as he closely tracked the quaffle's trajectory. Yet the moment he saw it, he fell into slight confusion. The ball was moving swiftly, but why was its aim so off? Even the gathered students on the ground appeared bewildered. Xiaoji had displayed such impressive flying skills earlier. How could his throwing accuracy be so poor? Watching the quaffle approach, Wood saw no need to move at all. Even if it were aimed directly at an empty goal, it stood no chance of scoring. Wood figured this was Xiaoji's first actual throw, and he was probably nervous. Just as Wood prepared to encourage him to relax, his peripheral vision caught the quaffle once more. To everyone's astonishment, after tracing a flawless arc through the air, the quaffle suddenly changed direction at an unbelievable angle and flew straight into the goal hoop on Wood's right. What on earth? Did Xiaoji use magic? Wood exclaimed in shock. Down below, Dean shouted excitedly. Banana shot. That's a banana shot. Crescent moon blade. So cool. Before anyone could ask what a banana shot or a crescent moon blade was, Dean proceeded to explain how this technique involved making a soccer ball curve mid-flight, a common tactic in Muggle football. Essentially, when a soccer ball is kicked, it spins rapidly, causing differing air pressures on either side. This results in a deviation in its flight path, making it curve. Xiaoji's throw worked the same way. The quaffle spun at high speed, thus changing direction. Granted, just like kicking a ball, anyone could make a thrown ball spin. However, No thrown ball could ever spin as fast as one kicked. After all, leg power vastly exceeded arm strength, and acceleration differed too. If the quaffle were a small ball like a baseball, most people could make it curve this way. But given its size, comparable to a volleyball, only someone possessing extraordinary strength like Xiaji could achieve such results. No wizard possessed strength comparable to his. No one else could hurl a quaffle with baseball-like velocity. Of course, Hagrid might have been capable as well. Did you use magic? Magic isn't allowed in Quidditch, Wood remarked, frowning. No magic at all, this is simply a spinning ball. Increase its spin rate, and it'll curve, Xiaji replied calmly. This technique is quite common in both Muggle football and baseball. Being from a purely wizarding family, Wood had never witnessed such Muggle sports. May I see you try a few more times? Wood tossed another quaffle toward Xiaji. Of course. Xiaji promptly hurled another spinning ball. This time, standing much closer, Wood clearly observed the quaffle's extreme rotation at the exact moment it left his hand. Eyes lighting up, Wood decided to give it a try himself. Yet despite multiple attempts, he failed. His throws lacked the necessary spin rate compared to Xiaji's. Still, even his attempts produced slight curves, though nowhere near as pronounced. This proved Xiaji's technique was valid. No magic was involved, and it seemed only someone possessing his superhuman strength could execute it effectively. Overjoyed, Wood flew back to the goalposts and urged Xiaji to continue throwing. He needed to thoroughly test the power of such curve shots. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Grasping Wood's intent, Xiaji proceeded to throw only spinning balls thereafter. Clockwise spin, counterclockwise spin, leftward curves, rightward bends, even diagonal variations like upper left, upper right, and lower right. No matter the direction, Xiaji made the quaffle bend exactly as he wished. The results spoke for themselves. All 10 of his throws hit the target perfectly. Wood fully grasped the terrifying potential of this technique. A ball that seemed destined to miss could still curve unpredictably. Its deceptive nature surpassed even Cassandra Vole's feints, making it far more likely to trip up a keeper. Even knowing the ball would curve, stopping it proved nearly impossible. Until the quaffle left the thrower's hand, no one knew which way it'd deviate. By the time its trajectory became apparent, it was far too late. And unlike normal throws, Xiaji's curved shots traveled at much greater speeds too. Ecstatic, Wood immediately decided to recruit both Xiaji and Cassandra Vole. The onlookers were utterly awestruck by Xiaji's skill. Dean gazed at him with utter reverence, throwing a quaffle like a baseball, making it curve just like a soccer ball. This guy was nothing short of a god. Seeing this, the other hopefuls conceded defeat. Further trials seemed pointless. They all agreed that Xiaji and Cassandra Vole deserved spots on the team far more than they did. Thus, this year's Gryffindor Quidditch tryouts concluded early. Ultimately, Xiaji and Cassandra Vole joined Gryffindor's Quidditch team as chasers. Fred and George flanked Xiaji on either side. "We knew you'd make chaser. We said so over the summer. I kinda hoped you'd be a beater, though. That way we'd get to watch you smash those Slytherin gorillas' brains to bits." Xiaji grabbed both twins. "Actually, you two could do that too. Train with me daily, and you'll easily pulverize those thick-headed Slytherins." "Really? When have I ever lied to you?" "Not." Fred and George promptly refused. They knew Harry had trained under Xiaji too, and now Harry trembled at the mere mention of training. They weren't falling for this. They'd rather spend their time perfecting pranks. For the sake of blasting Slytherin brutes, training simply wasn't worth it. Wood led them back to the locker room and introduced them to the rest of the team. "Your brooms are Nimbus 2001s, identical to Slytherin's. Your skills are superb too. Henceforth, you'll form the core of our tactics." Hastily removing his red team robe, Wood added excitedly, "I've got to devise new strategies centered around you too." Chapter 159. Cedric. "Miss Vole, are you Xiaji's girlfriend?" Xiaji changed into his regular clothes and stepped out of the common room. Today had been quite an exhilarating day of flying, though now that the excitement had faded, he found himself feeling rather hungry. Cassandra Vole also changed and came out, though she still held her broomstick in her hand.
Good. You didn't disappoint me.
From now on, carrying my broomstick is your responsibility. With that, she shoved the broom into Xiaoji's hands and then turned away haughtily. Xiaoji shook his head helplessly. She actually had a storage ring capable of holding a broomstick. Cassandra seemed to notice he wasn't following her. What are you staring at? If you don't hurry up, all the chicken legs will be eaten up. Xiaoji had to admit that was far more effective at getting him to move. He tucked away the broomstick and hurried after Cassandra toward the Great Hall. By the time they arrived, Hermione was already there. Upon seeing Xiaoji, she beamed sweetly and slid over a silver platter piled high with roasted chicken legs. Cassandra let out a soft huff of disdain. Starving as he was, Xiaoji's eyes instantly lit up at the sight. He promptly sat down and began devouring the food. Quite a few people had witnessed Xiaoji's performance during today's tryouts. Naturally, many gazes turned toward him, mostly from girls, of course. After all, Xiaoji's charm was undeniable. Ever since his arrival at Hogwarts, he'd attracted the attention of countless female students. Yet Cassandra remained glued to his side, and under her imposing aura, no other girl dared approach him or even greet him. Only a few, like Hermione, possessed enough confidence to withstand Cassandra's presence. Of course, there were also plenty of boys paying attention to Xiaoji, and they, unlike the girls, weren't intimidated by Cassandra's aura at all. At that moment, a handsome, tall, and slender boy walked over. Xiaoji noticed him approaching at once. "Hello, my name is Cedric Diggory, Seeker for Hufflepuff. Your performance out on the field today was absolutely incredible." "Hello, I'm Xiaoji." Xiaoji set down his chicken leg, and the grease on his hands vanished instantly. He reached out warmly and shook Cedric's hand. Cedric froze for a moment. He'd expected Xiaoji's greasy hand to make contact, yet that slimy sensation never came. Instead, he felt Xiaoji's hand was dry and warm. "Your spells are flawless. I honestly thought you'd leave my hand covered in chicken grease," Cedric exclaimed in awe. He finally realized that the moment Xiaoji set down the leg, he'd cast a cleaning charm silently and wandlessly. Even Cedric, now a fourth-year student, couldn't pull off such a feat, and clearly, Xiaoji's spell work was impeccable. "You're too kind, senior. My spellcasting is merely average. In fact, I'd love to learn from you." Though Cedric knew Xiaoji was being modest, he still felt utterly charmed. Xiaoji possessed extraordinary talent, yet remained humble and unpretentious. This only deepened Cedric's admiration. Xiaoji, too, held Cedric Diggory in high regard. He was a truly good person, brilliant, graceful, and virtuous. Like all Hufflepuffs, he possessed an unshakable sense of justice. Xiaoji had always felt Cedric's death in the original story was a terrible loss. He embodied all the finest qualities a Hogwarts student could have. Now, with Xiaoji around, that tragedy could finally be averted. Xiaoji invited Cedric to sit beside him, and they began chatting casually. After discussing Quidditch briefly, Xiaoji smoothly steered the conversation toward food. No Hufflepuff could ever resist such temptation. Cedric hadn't eaten yet, so Xiaoji enthusiastically recommended several dishes he'd taught the Hogwarts house elves. Soon, Cedric found himself utterly enchanted by the vast, wondrous culinary culture of the East. Delicious. Absolutely delicious. "Why haven't I seen these dishes before?" Cedric exclaimed between bites. "Because I only recently taught them to the house elves." "Ah, so you're the one who taught them." Back at the start of term, there were a few new additions. Haha, those were recipes Professor Dumbledore requested. He adores sweet and sour pork and sweet and sour carp. Both are delightfully tangy and sweet. "That's wonderful. I'd love to eat such food every day. By the way, do you know the Hogwarts house elves? Have you ever been to the kitchens?"
"Yes.
Fred and George showed me where they are. During holidays, you're welcome to visit my home. I'll prepare dishes you've never tasted before." Meanwhile, Xiaoji himself ate with equal fervor. He'd noticed Cedric was just as much of a food enthusiast, devouring food at an equally rapid pace. That simply wouldn't do. Cassandra, meanwhile, delicately sampled some mashed potatoes from a bowl. She watched the two voraciously eating and felt nothing but disgust. "No one's fighting you for it. There's no need to eat so frantically," Hermione remarked helplessly. Their eating habits were downright absurd. "I can't believe I finally met a rival today," Xiaji declared solemnly. "Someone whose eating speed rivals my own. I always thought Ron was my only true peer in this field. Ahem. I'm sorry, but it's just so delicious. I couldn't help myself." Cedric scratched his head sheepishly. Soon both had their fill. In the end, though, Xiaji emerged victorious in this contest. He couldn't outpace Cedric in speed, but in sheer volume consumed, there was no contest at all. Cedric watched in utter disbelief as Xiaji, seemingly unfazed, devoured another roast duck at the same relentless pace. "No wonder you're so strong. Do you perhaps have some magical creature bloodline?" Cedric couldn't help but ask. Cassandra snorted softly from the side.
Humph.
"I've always suspected he's got ogre blood. His appetite is terrifying. And his brain's just as dull as an ogre's. He's utterly clueless. That wooden-headed fool." Xiaji rolled his eyes. Whether from choking or irritation, no one could tell. "Ahem. So, Miss Vole, is she your girlfriend?"
Puffed.
Upon hearing this, Cassandra instantly spewed out the chilled lemonade she'd just sipped, drenching Xiaji's face. "What nonsense are you spouting? How could I possibly be his girlfriend?" Her face turned redder than a monkey's rear. "I'm full. I'm leaving." With that, she fled in a panic, nearly tripping over her own feet in her haste. Cedric watched her retreat, baffled, then raised his wand and cast a cleaning charm on Xiaji. You two seem inseparable, so I assumed." Then he noticed Hermione. "Oh, I see now. So Miss Granger is your actual girlfriend, right?" Pft, cough. Hermione nearly choked on her own breath. "W, what are you talking about? That's not the case at all. I've still got homework to do. I must get started now." Blushing furiously, she clutched her thick textbooks, stood up hastily, and bolted away with her head bowed. Chapter 160. Tom, you're so kind and gentle. Well, not really? Cedric looked utterly dejected. He had actually guessed wrong twice in a row. Cedric. Xiaji took a big gulp of chilled lemonade, finally managing to get the food stuck in his throat down. He gazed at Cedric with utmost seriousness. "A student's primary duty is to study diligently. How can one constantly be preoccupied with romance? Besides, we're still quite young. Early romance is highly inappropriate." "Oh," Cedric looked at Xiaji with profound admiration. "Xiaji, you're truly incredible. If I were in your shoes, I definitely wouldn't be able to keep my composure while spending so much time with such beautiful girls." Cedric then popped a small piece of pudding into his mouth. "If it were me, I'd have already confessed my feelings. Cedric, I'm only 12 years old. I'm still a child. I have no such worldly desires. Right now, all I wish to do is focus entirely on my studies." Xiaji spoke with utter sincerity. Xiaji was a serious individual, a future candidate for the greatest white wizard. He possessed noble morals and unwavering kindness. How could he possibly spend his days fantasizing about playing around with pretty girls? Absurd. Cedric fell silent for a long while before finally managing to utter, "You truly love studying." At least on the surface, that was how Xiaji appeared. Yet what he truly thought, apart from himself, no one would ever know. After chatting with Cedric some more, Xiaji returned to Gryffindor's common room. Hermione and Cassandra Vole weren't there, so Xiaji headed back to his own dormitory. Having a dorm room all to himself was rather enjoyable. At least it made it much easier for him to do whatever he pleased. Xiaji closed his dorm door, then pulled his suitcase out from beneath his bed. Ever since the basement at his home was completed, the unicorns no longer needed to frolic inside the suitcase. Though the sky down there was artificial as well, the unicorns still preferred it over anywhere else. According to Black Horn, the basement's entrance was far larger than the suitcase. At last, he wouldn't have to worry about its edges snagging his precious parts whenever he entered or exited. Xiaoji opened the suitcase and climbed inside. Inside, everything remained unchanged: lush green grass and that lovely red cottage. Xiaoji entered the study room within the cottage and sat down, then took out the potion recipe Tom had written for him. He picked up a quill and began scribbling notes onto a sheet of parchment. Given his current skill level, he could easily eliminate those ingredient combinations Tom had deliberately misstated. Yet, even with those corrections, the remaining fragmented framework wouldn't restore the original recipe's integrity. Still, no matter how complex a potion formula might be, it always originated from human experimentation. If Salazar Slytherin could do it, then Xiaoji certainly could too, though this would undoubtedly require numerous trials and considerable time. By the time Xiaoji finally recreated the recipe, Cassandra Vole might even have grown up. At that point, such a recipe might no longer even be necessary to bolster her magical abilities. Xiaoji spent quite some time studying inside the suitcase before carefully placing the recipe back and climbing out. Tom's actual potion formula surely contained flaws and numerous side effects. Otherwise, Tom wouldn't have later sought Snape's assistance to refine it. Had he not coveted the upgraded blood fusion potion formula offered as a system reward, Xiaoji would have handed Tom's version over long ago. He had no use for a recipe fraught with adverse effects. Xiaoji retrieved his diary once more, opened it, and promptly began writing. Tom, are you there? Lately, I've been studying potions. Oh, how's it going? Is it difficult? I can certainly help you. Tom appeared somewhat surprised upon hearing that Xiaoji was studying potions. Yet he felt no trace of worry. In his eyes, someone as inept as Xiaoji stood no chance of mastering potions. Naturally, he'd never spot any errors within the recipe. Moreover, Tom had anticipated that Xiaoji wouldn't wish for anyone else to learn of its contents. Thus, he felt utterly certain that Xiaoji wouldn't be foolish enough to show the recipe to his potions professor. Well, previously I showed little interest in potions, which is why my grades last term weren't very good. But due to this recipe, I've been working extremely hard at studying it lately. Xiaoji wrote on. As you know, to successfully brew that potion, I feel I can't rely entirely on your help. Those ingredients are incredibly hard to obtain. If I mess it up, it'd be disastrous. I understand your concerns, Xiaoji. By all means, keep studying potions. Perhaps your natural talent in it will prove quite surprising. Tom continued playing the role of a caring, understanding senior. But our potions instructor, Professor Snape, is Slytherin's head of house. He's absolutely terrifying. I believe he dislikes every student outside Slytherin, and he particularly loathes students like me. I truly doubt I'll ever learn anything useful from him. Xiaoji wrote, his expression now one of pitiful vulnerability. It was practically identical to Neville Longbottom's expression after being drenched in Snape's wrath. That's quite all right, Xiaoji. My own potions grades are quite decent. I'll gladly assist you. Should any problems arise, feel free to ask me.
Ah,
Tom, you're so kind. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. You can't possibly imagine how impossible it is for me to learn anything useful from a professor who clearly dislikes me. Of course, assisting my juniors is precisely what a senior ought to do. After all, I'm merely a memory. I have no idea how long I'll persist. Utilizing this limited time to help you seems only fitting.
huh?
What's wrong? Are you about to disappear? Panic flashed across Xiaoji's face. It's all right. I can still hold on for a while. So, eventually you'll leave me? His expression turned sorrowful. Yes, I'm merely a fragment of memory. Even before you opened me, I'd already existed in this world for quite some time. Lately, I've sensed my magical energy steadily diminishing. Perhaps soon, all magic within this diary will vanish entirely, and then I'll cease to exist. But you just promised to help me.
How can that be?
Is there any way to replenish your magical energy? There is, though it might be somewhat cruel. Cruel? Are you suggesting murder? Of course not. I only require a modicum of soul energy. Any soul will do, regardless of its origin. Yet the act of killing other creatures to steal their souls, thereby extending my own existence, is undeniably selfish and cruel. As long as it doesn't involve killing humans, it's perfectly fine. At our gamekeeper's place, there are plenty of roosters. I can easily catch a few. Roosters ought to suffice, right? Absolutely they will. With such soul energy replenishment, I'll be able to endure far longer. Tom wrote back, brimming with joy. Tom was ecstatic. Xiaji had genuinely fallen for his ruse. So long as he absorbed sufficient vitality and soul energy, his own power would gradually return. Once he'd regained even a fraction of his strength, he'd be able to siphon Xiaji's own vitality and soul energy at will. Eventually, he'd even gain control over Xiaji's body to make him perform acts even Xiaji himself wouldn't recall afterward, like opening the Chamber of Secrets and unleashing the basilisk.